Welcome back everyone to another DSCC lab walkthrough. Today we'll be going over lab 2 of Exchange post-deployment configuration. Our main tasks are to rename and move databases, configure Mailflow and client access, database availability groups, and configure Edge subscriptions. Alright, so let's get started with task 1, rename mailbox and move files from our Exchange servers. Now I'm in my EAC right now on Exchange 1, so let's navigate to our servers portion and then to our database tab in EAC. Okay, so right now we see our mailbox databases with the default names that they're created with. You can see what server they reside on. So let's go ahead and change these to the names that we want them to be on our network. All right, so let's select the database that we want to change and then click on the edit pencil. All right, now that this is loaded, we can go ahead and change the name right here on this top box, and we'll name this mailbox database MBDB01 for mailbox database 01. Okay, and now we'll go ahead and we'll do the same thing for mailbox database 2. Change this MBDB02. And now for database 3, go ahead and change this to MBDB03. Okay, now that we've renamed our databases, we can move on to the next step, which is to move the database and transaction log files. All right, we can see here that our databases have been renamed successfully. So let's move on to the next portion. Now in here, I'm navigating to the location where I have these folders created, which is on my G drive created in the previous lab. Now you see there's my Exchange database logs and my Exchange database files. Alright, so now that I have those file paths created, I'm going to open up an Exchange management shell. I'm going to run it as admin. Okay, it's taking a minute to load, but alright, there it is. So let's run this command. Change this to EDB. Alright, we'll type in A for yes to all on both of these questions that pop up. Okay, and that was for our database. So now let's do the same thing except for our log folder path. All right, we can see that it's already in there, but we have nothing in this Exchange database logs folder. Let's go ahead and change that. Let's type in new or move database path. I'm just going to change the previous command. I'm going to change EDB file path to log folder path. And I'm going to change the location or the path from Exchange database files to Exchange log files. I'm also going to remove the EDB at the end. All right, exchange database logs. And MDB01. All right, so let's go ahead and run this command now. And that completed successfully. All right, so now let's begin with task 2, configure Mailflow and client access. So I'm still in my EAC. I'm going to navigate to Mailflow on the left-hand side and then send connectors. All right, now that this has loaded, I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus sign for a new send connector. And I'm going to name this XXMU to internet. So 13mu to internet. And I'm going to change the type to internet. Go ahead and click on next. Under this page, we're going to leave all the settings as default. Go ahead and click on next. Now in here, we will add an address space. We'll leave it as SMTP. And under the fully qualified domain name, we will place an asterisk. So once you have that configured, click on save. Check the scoped send connector box at the bottom and then click on next. And here we are going to add our source servers. And for this, we're going to add Exchange 1 and 2. All right, let me remove Exchange 3. All right, and then once you have your source servers selected, click on Finish. All right, now our next step is to configure our required DNS items on our DNS servers. So let's navigate to our domain controller. Now, some of the DNS records that we need to create will be our MX records, our A records, our CNAME records, and our conditional forwarders. So let's open up DNS. Okay, now let's select our forward lookup zone folder and navigate down to our domain. Okay, and now let's add some records. So let's right click in this folder on the right hand side. And the first record we are going to create is our MX record. Now for this record, all we need to configure is our fully qualified domain name. We're going to leave our host or child domain box blank, and under the fully qualified domain name, we will input our domain. So xxmu.xxmu.usmc.mil. or excuse me, xxmu exchange 01, and then our domain. And then we will do this for exchange 2 as well. Okay, now our next record is our A record. So let's right click in this folder. Notice how we already have A records configured for our exchanges 1, 2, and 3. So now let's create an A record for our Edge transport server. Alright, so now that that's created, let's create our CNAME records. Now the two, or excuse me, the 2, 3 CNAME records that we need to configure will be for our OWA, our auto discover, and for webmail. Alright, so my alias will be OWA, and my target host will be set to mail.xxmu.usmc.mil. Go ahead and click on OK. Now let's create the following CNAME. For auto discover, the FQDN will be mail.xxmu.usmc.mil. And then we will configure one more CNAME, like I said earlier, and this one will be for our webmail. So go ahead and type webmail under alias, and our FQDN once again will be mail.xxmu.usmc.mil. Alright, so I meant to type that down here. So let me correct that. Mail.xxmu.usmc.mil. Click on OK. Alright, now the last thing we need to configure in our forward lookup zone is the host A records for mail. Right, so right now we have host A records to our exchanges, but you can see by the configuration that I just made that I created some that are pointing to this mail.xxmu.usmc.mil, but we don't have a record currently created for any of that, so it's essentially it's going nowhere right now, right? So, and we want to change that. So let's go ahead and create a new host A record. This name is going to be mail. And our IP address is going to be the IP address of our first ESX, or excuse me, our first exchange server. Okay, add host, and now I will create this 2 more times for the remaining 2 exchange servers. Now what we're configuring here is known as a DNS round robin. That way, anytime somebody tries to connect to us via OWA or webmail, the way that this happens is that it'll point to that mail.xxmu.usmc source essentially, and it'll point to either whatever's available or whatever is next in the DNS round robin cycle. This is a form of kind of load balancing our services. All right, so now let's move on to the last thing, which is our conditional forwarder. Now, this is really just so that we can talk to other people outside of our domain or our network, right? So right now we don't, in this environment, I can't talk to another domain. So I need to configure something so I can talk to them. I'm going to configure a conditional forwarder for 32mu.usmc.mil, and I'm going to add their IP address to their DNS server. I'm going to reconfigure these real quick. I'm gonna delete these, sorry, yeah, and then I'm going to re-add them. Now the way our environment is set up, it's not going to allow me to resolve these. All right, it's not going to pop up as green, but I know that it's going to work. So let's re-add these 172.18.32.21. That is their master server. All right, so let's go ahead and save. All right, let's click on store the conditional folder in Active Directory and replicate it as follows. And then click on OK to save your configuration. All right, so there it is. I have my conditional folder set up. This will allow me to send emails to them later on in the labs. So now the next thing we need to do is configure our internal and external URLs. All right, so now let's navigate back into our EAC. I'm gonna head back into my Exchange 01. All right, and then here I'm gonna navigate to my servers, and then servers again. Now I'm going to edit the settings to Exchange 01. So make sure it's selected and then click on the pencil. Okay, and then select Outlook Anywhere on the left hand side. Right, and we are going to specify the internal host name that users will use to connect to your organization and the external. So let's change this external host name to OWA and the internal to webmail. All right, click on save. Click OK on the warning, and then do the same thing for Exchange 02. Now remember, this is possible, right? Made possible by the fact that we configured that CNAME record for OWA that is pointing to mail, and then we also configured host A records named mail that correspond to Exchange 1, 2, and 3. All right, click on OK. Do the same thing for Exchange 3, all of our Exchange servers. All right, there's my external host name. Let me change my internal host name. Click on save. Okay, now we've configured the external and internal host names. Now let's configure our virtual directories for both Exchange 1 and 2. So still within the same portion of the servers, we will select on the virtual directories on the top side or at the very top. All right, and then you see here at the very top, we can filter this by the type of virtual directory that we want to configure. All right, so it can be EWS, AutoDiscover, OWA, whatever the case may be. And then we can also filter it at the top by servers. Now notice how I can't select more than one and edit them at the same time. So this makes this process a little bit lengthy if you don't know how to use PowerShell or have a script that does this for you. So let's run through it just real quick so we can see what it looks like. I'm going to change one on my, let's change this back to all. All right, we'll leave it here. I'm going to change the one for my auto discover, or actually let's start with ECP. So I'm going to select the virtual directory that I want to configure. Click on the pencil to edit it. And in here I will configure the internal URL and the external URL that I want people to use when they're trying to access ECP. So I want them to use owa.xxmu.usmc.mil/ECP. And for my external URL, I will configure this to webmail. So HTTPS webmail.13mu.usmc.mil/ECP. And that will follow the same process for any virtual directory that I want to configure, or any internal or an external URL that I want to configure, such as my OWA, PowerShell, AutoDiscover, anything that's available on your servers. But unfortunately, like I said, if you don't have a script, you have to do these one by one. So now let's move on to the next step. Let's turn off IE Enhanced Security Configurations. The reason that we're doing this in our environment is so that we are able to use OWA on our Exchange server. So let's open up my server manager, right? And then in here, once it loads, I'm going to select this IE Enhanced Security Configuration. Click on the hyperlink, and I'm going to set these to off. And then click on OK. All right, now that we've configured that, let's refresh this real quick, see, and ensure that it actually took effect. All right, there it is. It's off. Now let's close this, and let's confirm that DNS and virtual directories have been configured correctly. So I'm going to try to go to OWA by going to owa.xxmu.usmc.mil and webmail. Now I only showed you guys how to configure one service, which was ECP, but I did already have these other services configured through a script. And like I said, it's the same process. You would just select it and type in the internal and external URL. All right, so I see that I get this warning. All right, and I am able to access this using OWA URL. So now let's try to use the webmail URL. Okay, and there I am. I'm prompted with the same warning. Click on more information and go on to the web page. Okay, and I was able to verify that I am able to get to these sites using the URLs I configured. All right, so now for our next step, we are going to configure our database availability groups. Let's run PowerShell as an administrator. Now, currently, I'm in Exchange 1. I'm going to type this get-tag Windows feature command for failover clustering to see and verify whether this feature is installed or not. So get-tag Windows feature, name, this is failover clustering. All right, now I can see here that failover clustering is already installed on Exchange 01. So let's check Exchange 02. Let's run the same command. Okay, and we can see that this service or this feature says that it's available, but it's not installed. And we want this to be installed on every Exchange server that is participating in the DAG. So let's go ahead and install this on Exchange 02. Now, Exchange 03 will not be participating in the DAG, so we will not be installing the service on that server. All right, so now go ahead and restart your server. Okay, now that we've restarted our server, we can go ahead and continue with the creation of our DAG. So let's open up EAC. All right, I'm gonna log in as my DA. All right, and now let's navigate to the servers portion on our left-hand side, and then database availability groups. You can see we have nothing in here, so let's change that. Let's click on the plus sign and select or create a new database availability group. I'm going to name this DAG xxmu DAG. Now my witness server, I'm going to leave, or I'm going to set this to xxmu exchange 03. And this is the reason that Exchange 3 is not participating in the DAG itself, because it's acting as a witness server. Now for the IP address, I will not assign an IP address to my DAG, so go ahead and click save when you're done. Alright, and now that we've created the DAG, we need to add member servers to it. So let's select our DAG and then click on the Manage DAG Membership icon. And then here we will add the members of our DAG. So click on the plus sign and add both Exchange 1 and 2. 1 and 2. Click on save. All right, that completed successfully. So let's close this out. And now the next thing we are going to do is add database copies. And we are doing this to ensure database level recovery. So we will create copies of passive databases on Exchange 01 and 02. So before I do that, I just want to verify that my DAG was created successfully. So in Exchange Management Shell, I'm going to run this get tag database availability group command for 13mu DAG, which is the DAG I just created. Okay, and there I have it. I can see that the name of my DAG, the members or the servers of my DAG, the server that's acting as my witness, the directory of my witness. If I had an IP set to this DAG, I can be able to view that in here as well. All right, and at the very bottom it says is valid true. So I'm happy with that. So let's go ahead and minimize this and move on to the next step, which is adding those database copies. So let's navigate to servers and then to databases. And let's select mailbox database 01 or the server that you want, or the mailbox database that you want to create a copy of. We'll start with one. We will select it and select the these three little dots up at the very top on the right hand side. And then add database copy. And then specify mailbox server. We want to specify where this copy is going to be stored. So we'll select Exchange 2. And that's all we have to select. So let's click on save. Now keep in mind, the earlier on in your deployment of your environment you do this, the faster this will be because it has less data to copy. Right? If you do this later on, obviously it's still a good thing, but it's going to take a little bit longer. All right, so now let's do the same thing for database 2. And we will select Exchange 1. Click on OK, and then click on Save. Okay, that completed successfully as well. So we can go ahead and close this out. And now I can see, since I'm not using mailbox database 03 because it's acting as my witness server, I'm going to delete it. Okay, and I get this warning that says the specified database has been removed. You must remove the database file located at this path from your computer manually if it exists. So specified database mailbox database 03. So let's click on OK. Let's head over to Exchange 03 so that we can delete this manually. Alright, so let's navigate to that path. I can see that that file still exists, so now I've deleted it. I've completely deleted mailbox database for Exchange 03. Alright, so now let's move on to our last task, which is to configure Edge subscription. So I'm in my Edge transport server right now, and I'm going to run Exchange Management Shell as an administrator. Alright, that took a minute. Alright, and now what we're going to do is create and export an Edge subscription file on our transport server. So let's create this Edge subscription file by typing in new tag Edge subscription space tag file name space and then quotes. We will put the location where we want this file to go to. I'm just going to put this at the root of my C drive. I'm going to name this file Edge subscription xxmu.xml and quotations. Alright, click on yes to all or type in yes to all. Okay, and now I can go to my C drive, and there is my Edge subscription file. So now I need to get this to Exchange 01. So I'm going to put this on a shared drive that I can pull from Exchange 01 so that I can use this file and import it into Exchange. So I'll put it on my desktop first. Now I'll navigate to my shared drive. Alright, and I'll place this file in here. Now let's log into Exchange 01. Minimize this. Have my EMS open. Let's locate that Edge subscription file from our shared drive. Okay, and I'm going to copy this so I can place it in the root of my C drive. Alright, so my servers don't like when I do it from the shared drive, so I have to place it on my desktop and then place it in my C drive. Alright, so now let's go to EMS and let's run the following command. Let's type in brackets byte open brackets close close $ file equals it's open parentheses get tag content space tag path, and then in quotes we'll put the location of our subscription file that we just placed in our C drive, so that's what we will set this path to. We'll do space tag encoding, space, byte, space, read count 0, and close parentheses. So what we just did, right, we just essentially created a variable named file that, and we wanted to do what's inside the parentheses. So I messed this up real quick. Let me change this. All right, there we go. So now let's run the following command, which is new edge subscription space tag file data space and our variable file space tag site and then the name of our site. If you don't know your site, you can type in the command, I think it's get tag site or get tag default site, and you'll be able to pull that name. All right, so default first site name. Click enter or click click on enter. All right, and there we see that the command completed successfully. Next thing we're going to do is run a test net connection to our ET so that we can ensure that we can actually speak to or talk to our edge transport server. Let's type in test.net connection space tag computer name xxmu et01 port 50636. Now I have my firewall turned off, so this won't affect me anyway, but if you had a firewall running, you need to make sure that they can communicate through this port. All right, that completed successfully. So now let's start the edge synchronization and ensure that we see a result of success. All right, and then we have it. We have configured our edge transport server successfully.